You think you know the story: a beautiful princess, a jealous stepmother, a poisoned apple, and a glass coffin where true love's kiss breaks an eternal slumber. It's a classic fairy tale about beauty, envy, and the triumph of good over evil. But what if I told you that the narrative we know as Snow White is far older and infinitely more unsettling than a simple children's fable? What if it's a story that has echoed through the darkest corners of human history for over 3,800 years? A chilling whisper from a time when female rivalry was a matter of life and death, when rituals of purity and passage were paramount, and when the boundaries between the living and the dead were terrifyingly porous. Because buried beneath this seemingly innocent tale lies a profound secret, a narrative passed down by word of mouth through millennia. A story of ritualistic poisoning, of symbolic death and rebirth, of ancient initiations, and something far more terrifying than just a wicked queen. Once you hear the truth behind the fairest of them all, you'll never see it the same way again. Welcome back, Darklings. Before we unearth the secrets of this enduring narrative, let's begin with the most well-known version of the tale. But listen closely, because hidden in this familiar story are whispers of something far more ancient, far more visceral, waiting to be rediscovered. Every detail, every familiar phrase, holds a deeper, darker resonance. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, a beautiful queen pricked her finger while sewing, and 3 drops of blood fell onto the snow. Wishing for a child with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony, she soon gave birth to a daughter, whom she named Snow White. But the queen died, and the king took a new wife, a woman of stunning beauty, but filled with vanity and wicked jealousy. This new queen possessed a magical mirror, to which she would often ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror would always reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." But as Snow White grew, her beauty blossomed, surpassing even the queen's. One day, the mirror's answer changed. "Queen, you are lovely, it is true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." Enraged, the queen commanded a huntsman to take Snow White into the forest, kill her, and bring back her lungs and liver as proof. The huntsman, however, took pity on Snow White. He killed a young boar instead, bringing its organs to the queen, and advised Snow White to flee deeper into the forest. Lost and afraid, Snow White stumbled upon a tiny cottage, meticulously neat and furnished with 7 miniature beds. Exhausted, she ate a little food from each plate and fell asleep. The cottage belonged to 7 dwarves who worked in the mines. When they returned, they discovered Snow White and, hearing her story, offered her refuge in exchange for keeping their home tidy. They warned her never to open the door to anyone. But the wicked queen, consulting her mirror again, learned that Snow White was still alive. She disguised herself as an old peddler woman and journeyed to the dwarf's cottage, attempting to kill Snow White first with a tightly laced bodice, then with a poisoned comb. Each time, the dwarves saved Snow White just in time. Finally, the queen crafted a beautiful but fatally poisoned apple, half red and half white. She offered it to Snow White, who, despite her caution, couldn't resist its allure. Taking a bite, Snow White fell into a deep, death-like slumber. The dwarves, unable to revive her, built a glass coffin for her, placing it on a mountain, believing her truly dead. They mourned her for many years. One day, a prince came across the coffin. Captivated by Snow White's beauty, he begged the dwarves to let him take her. As his servants carried the coffin, they stumbled, dislodging the piece of poisoned apple from Snow White's throat. She awoke, and seeing the prince, immediately fell in love. They married, and the wicked queen, invited to the wedding, was forced to dance in red-hot iron shoes until she died. Or so the story goes, in its most familiar iteration. The tale you've just heard, with its specific elements of the talking mirror, the poisoned apple, the 7 dwarves, and the awakening kiss, or dislodged apple piece, is closest to the version meticulously documented and published by the revered Brothers Grimm in their renowned 1812 collection, children's and household tales. Their version, Schneewittchen, is widely considered the definitive modern telling. However, the fundamental narrative, a beautiful young woman targeted by an older, jealous female relative, a period of apparent death or exile, and a magical awakening into a new life, begin with 19th century German folklorists. In fact, by the time it reached these esteemed collectors, it was already incredibly, impossibly ancient indeed, a testament to its profound and enduring resonance across human history and culture. Folklorists, those dedicated scholars who meticulously collect, compare, and analyze the countless stories passed down through generations, have identified this story pattern as one of the most persistent and globally distributed in human history. It falls under the Arne Thompson-Euther (ATU) Index, a comprehensive system for classifying folktales by their recurring motifs, character archetypes, and plot elements. This particular story is categorized as ATU 709, Snow White. There are countless known versions of this narrative, variations on this core transformative theme, scattered across the globe, from the nuanced oral traditions of European peasants to ancient tales found in parts of Asia, Africa, and beyond. Each version, while adapted to its unique cultural context, its local magical elements, and its specific dangers, invariably retains the same chilling core. A young woman threatened by an older female, a symbolic death, and a miraculous revival often tied to a male figure. And this leads us to the truly astonishing discovery of its age. While the precise origins of orally transmitted stories are inherently debated due to their fluid, evolving nature and lack of definitive written records, linguistic and comparative folkloric studies overwhelmingly suggest that the core elements and deep structural motifs of Snow White are rooted in incredibly ancient Proto-Indo-European myths and folk narratives. This places its origins at least 800 years ago, potentially much earlier, reaching back into the Middle to Late Bronze Age. This means it predates many foundational written texts, including much of the Old Testament. It was being whispered around communal fires, likely as a profound historical memory disguised as a magical event, or as a terrifying myth of societal rivalry, long before the rise of classical Greek civilization, before the grandeur and might of the Roman Empire, and centuries before the medieval concept of royalty. It is a narrative passed by word of mouth across countless generations, carried through vast human migrations, through the rise and fall of ancient societies, through periods of immense societal upheaval and transformation, and across millennia. And somehow, impossibly, remarkably, it survived, adapting and shifting, yet retaining its terrifying, enigmatic core. So, the crucial question then becomes, why does this specific, deeply unsettling pattern echo across so many cultures and so much time? What deep, universal truths about human nature, about female rivalry, about the transition from maidenhood to womanhood, or about forgotten rituals, are we truly remembering when we tell this story today? The answer lies in stripping away the comforting layers of later, more romanticized or sanitized versions and looking at the older, more primal, and often more horrifying underlying explanations. Let's begin by looking at the chilling central conflict, the wicked queen's jealousy of Snow White's beauty. For modern audiences, this is often understood as mere superficial vanity. But in ancient and pre-modern societies, beauty, especially for women, was inextricably linked to power, status, and reproductive potential. For a queen, the most beautiful woman was the most powerful, ensuring the king's favor and the continuation of the lineage. The arrival of a younger, more beautiful rival, particularly a stepdaughter, represented a direct existential threat to her status, her influence, and her very survival within a patriarchal court. This isn't just vanity. It's a brutal, zero-sum game of social hierarchy and survival, particularly for women whose power was derived from their position and appeal. The Queen's attempts to murder Snow White are not merely acts of wickedness. but desperate measures to eliminate a perceived threat to her entire existence. The talking mirror is another fascinating and profound element. A mirror that reflects truth, but also holds a consciousness, is a powerful symbol. In many ancient cultures, reflective surfaces were often seen as portals to other realms, places where spirits resided, or where one could gain divinatory knowledge. The Queen's mirror is her source of validation, but it's also her oracle, her direct link to a universal truth beyond her control. The mirror's declaration that Snow White is fairer is a cosmic judgment, an unavoidable pronouncement of fate. It symbolizes an external, objective standard of beauty or worth that the Queen cannot manipulate, embodying a truth she desperately tries to deny and then destroy. In some interpretations, the mirror could even represent the Queen's own inner, increasingly monstrous ego, reflecting her growing obsession and paranoia. Consider the Queen's repeated attempts to kill Snow White, each more insidious than the last. The huntsman ordered to bring her organs, a grisly ancient practice in some cultures to prove death, or even a symbolic act of consuming the victim's life force. The laced bodice, suffocation, restriction of life. The poisoned comb, a more intimate, insidious attack targeting vanity. And finally, the poisoned apple. The apple, often a symbol of knowledge, temptation, or fertility, as in the Garden of Eden or Greek myths, becomes an instrument of death. The half-red, half-white apple is particularly symbolic. It represents a deceptive duality: beauty hiding poison, life hiding death. Snow White's susceptibility to it highlights a deeper theme of temptation and the inherent danger in trusting appearances. This death by poison is not a true cessation of life, but a death-like trance, a form of suspended animation. This brings us to the profound concept of symbolic death and rebirth. Snow White's poisoning leads not to an actual death, but to a profound, death-like slumber. She is placed in a glass coffin, a clear, transparent tomb, which itself is highly symbolic. Glass was rare and precious in ancient times, and a transparent coffin allows the viewer to see the dead but perfectly preserved body, emphasizing her state of suspended animation, her uncorrupted beauty, and her waiting for resurrection. Being entombed in glass, often on a mountain or in a secluded glade, represents a period of liminality, a state between life and death, an isolation that is part of a larger transformational process. This motif of temporary death followed by awakening is incredibly ancient, found in myths across the globe, from Persephone's descent into the underworld to various fertility cults where the deity dies and is reborn with the seasons. It's an echo of initiation rites, where an individual undergoes a ritualistic death to their former self to be reborn into a new, higher status or phase of life. And what about the 7 dwarves? These unique characters, often portrayed as miners living deep within the earth, away from human society, are significant. In many ancient myths and folklore, subterranean beings or little people are often guardians of Earth's treasures, masters of metallurgy, or ancient spirits connected to the land. Their presence offers Snow White refuge in a liminal space, neither fully human civilization nor true wilderness. They are her protectors, living in a communal, ordered way. Their strict warning not to open the door to strangers emphasizes the dangers lurking outside their secluded, protected realm, acting as a crucial boundary between safety and the perilous world beyond. Their number, 7, is also highly symbolic across many cultures. 7 days of creation, 7 planets, etc., often representing completeness or a magical cycle. The prince's arrival and the awakening are also crucial. In many versions of the tale, it's not a kiss that revives Snow White. In the Grimm version, as the prince's servants carry the glass coffin, they stumble, causing the piece of poisoned apple to dislodge from Snow White's throat. This subtle detail speaks to a less magical, more physiological breaking of the spell, and emphasizes that her awakening is almost an accidental, fated occurrence rather than a specific magical act of love. However, the subsequent union with the prince represents her ultimate rebirth and triumph. The prince, a figure of external authority and potential, liberates her from her death-like state, restoring her to life and rightful queenship. This union is not just a romantic conclusion. It signifies her full transition from persecuted maiden to empowered ruler, achieving her destiny. The wedding, in many cultures, is a symbolic rebirth into a new family and social status. The wicked queen's ultimate fate forced to dance in red-hot iron shoes until she dices, a grim detail present in the grim version, often omitted in modern retellings. This form of punishment is rooted in medieval judicial practices and serves as a powerful, visceral form of poetic justice, a public display of retribution for her monstrous crimes driven by envy. Her obsession with beauty leads to her grotesque disfigurement and painful death, a stark warning against unchecked vanity and cruelty. The story of Snow White, in its deepest sense, functions as a powerful myth of initiation, transformation, and cosmic justice. It explores the profound human anxieties surrounding female beauty and rivalry within patriarchal structures, the terrifying potential for envy, and the universal journey from innocence to maturity through trials. It also touches on themes of death and rebirth, often linked to seasonal cycles or spiritual awakenings. The narrative reflects ancient beliefs in the power of mirrors, the symbolism of colors, white, red, black representing life, death, and purity, and the idea that true beauty is not merely superficial but holds a destined quality. Snow White's journey into the forest, her death in the glass coffin, and her eventual awakening and marriage mirrors ancient rite of passage narratives. She undergoes a ritualistic separation from her past life, enters a liminal state of symbolic death, the coffin, endures a period of suspended animation, and is then reborn into a new, adult identity as a queen. The mirror reflects the inescapable judgment of fate. The poisoned apple is the test, and the dwarves are the guides or guardians of her transitional phase. So, when we look at Snow White through this ancient primordial lens, it transforms from a simple children's story into a chilling, deeply resonant myth. It's a story about the relentless nature of envy, the profound vulnerability of beauty, and the horrifying realities faced by our distant ancestors, where a struggle for power could mean ritualistic murder. It's a tale that has survived for millennia because it speaks to fundamental human experiences: the transition from girlhood to womanhood, the dangers lurking in plain sight, and the enduring human belief in destiny and the ultimate triumph of inherent goodness. The jealous queen, the talking mirror, the poisoned apple, the glass coffin, these are not just elements of a fanciful story, but potent, enduring symbols encoded with ancient wisdom and visceral understandings of the world, passed down from a time when these threats were not merely metaphors, but daily, horrifying realities that shaped the very fabric of human life and human memory. Perhaps this tale isn't fiction at all, but a deep-seated memory, a haunting echo of a time when beauty was a dangerous commodity, when ritualistic murder was a very real fear, and the wisest, most crucial lessons were those whispered from one generation to the next, disguised as a simple story about a girl, a mirror, and an apple. And if that thought has you looking a little more closely at your own reflection, at the apples in your fruit bowl, at the people closest to you with a chilling new awareness, wait until you hear the truth behind more folklore stories.